They dragged me to the auction block like livestock, and my own father held the gavel. The saloon reeked of whiskey and broken promises when Rowan Vane, the mountain ghost himself, dropped a leather pouch heavy with gold onto the table. Every eye in Black Hollow watched as he bought me. Not for love, not for companionship, but to settle a debt my father couldn't pay with anything but me. They said Rowan was a savage, a killer, a man who preferred wolves to people. I thought I was being sold into hell. I was wrong about everything. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this tale travels across the world. The cards hit the table with the finality of a judge's hammer. Clara May Whitlock stood frozen in the doorway of the Rusty Nail Saloon, her breath caught somewhere between her lungs and her throat, watching her father throw away his last chip. Not a poker chip. Not money he'd already lost 3 hands ago. Her. "I ain't got the coin, Vane," Samuel Whitlock slurred, his words thick and wet like mud. His face was the color of spoiled meat, gray, sweating, desperate. "But I got something worth more than gold if you're man enough to take it." The saloon had gone quiet in that terrible way that meant everyone was listening but pretending not to. Clara felt their eyes on her like flies on a wound. She wanted to run. She wanted to scream. Instead, she stood there in her faded cotton dress, clutching a basket of mending she'd been bringing to Mrs. Callahan's boarding house, and felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. Rowan Vane didn't move. He sat at the far end of the table, half hidden in shadow despite the afternoon light struggling through the greasy windows. He was a big man, not fat, but built like something carved from oak and left to weather in the rain. His hair was dark, shaggier than fashion allowed, and his beard was trimmed close enough to see the hard line of his jaw. His clothes were plain, a wool shirt rolled to the elbows, trousers tucked into worn boots, a leather vest that had seen better years. But it was his eyes that made Clara's stomach drop. They were pale. Not blue exactly, more like winter ice over deep water, and they were looking right at her. "You offering what I think you're offering, Whitlock?" Rowan's voice was low, rough, like boots on gravel. Samuel laughed, a jagged, ugly sound. "She's 19, healthy, ain't been touched by no man. I swear it on my mother's grave. You take her off my hands, we call the debt square. Hell, I'll even throw in her dowry trunk. Got her mama's quilt in there and everything?" Clara's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her hands went numb. The basket slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a soft thud that nobody noticed. "Pah," she finally croaked. "Shut it, girl," Samuel snapped without looking at her. "This is men's business." Rowan leaned back in his chair, slow and deliberate. He picked up his whiskey glass, swirled it once, and took a drink. The silence stretched out long enough that Clara thought maybe he'd refuse. Maybe he'd stand up, walk out, and she could grab her father by his filthy collar and drag him home before he sold her soul to someone else. But Rowan set the glass down. "You're disgusting," he said quietly. Samuel blinked. "What?" "I said you're disgusting." Rowan's tone didn't rise. It didn't need to. "You'd sell your own daughter to cover your stupidity. Now hold on, but I'll do it." The air left the room. Rowan reached into his coat and pulled out a leather pouch. It landed on the table with a heavy thunk, coins shifting inside like bones in a bag. "That's $300, gold, more than enough to cover what you owe me and the house." Samuel's eyes went wide and wet. His hands trembled as he reached for the pouch. "Don't touch it yet," Rowan said, his voice dropping into something colder. "I want witnesses, and I want it in writing." "Writing?" Samuel laughed nervously. "Come on, Vane, your word's good enough. My word means she's mine, legal. You don't get to come crawling back when you sober up and decide you made a mistake. Understood?" Clara's legs finally remembered how to work. She stumbled forward, her voice cracking. "You can't do this." "Clara May, so help me," Samuel started. "No." She whirled on him, and for the first time in her life, she saw her father flinch. "You don't get to do this. I'm not a horse. I'm not a piece of land. I'm your daughter. Toujours. And you'll do what you're told," Samuel roared, lunging up from his chair. He grabbed her arm hard enough to bruise, dragging her closer. His breath reeked of whiskey and rot. "You think I want this? You think I got a choice? I'm 3 weeks from losing the house, girl. 3 weeks from sleeping in the street. You want that?" You want me dead in a ditch because I couldn't pay my debts? I'd rather that than this, Clara spat. Samuel's hand came up fast, but it never landed. Rowan was there, had moved faster than a man his size should have been able to, and his hand locked around Samuel's wrist like a steel trap. You hit her, Rowan said softly, and the deal's off, and I'll take back every cent you owe me in blood. Samuel went pale. He yanked his arm free and stumbled backward, cradling his wrist. Fine, just take her, she's yours. Rowan didn't look at Clara. He turned to the bartender, a wiry man named Ike, who'd been polishing the same glass for 5 minutes. You got paper and ink? Yeah, I do. Ike scrambled behind the bar and came back with a wrinkled sheet and a pencil. Write it down, Rowan ordered. Samuel Whitlock sells the marriage rights of his daughter, Clara May Whitlock, to Rowan Vane in exchange for $300 gold, paid in full on this day. Sign it, date it, and you, he gestured to Ike, witness it. Ike's hand shook as he wrote. Samuel scrawled his name at the bottom like he couldn't get it done fast enough. Clara stood there, numb. She felt like she was watching herself from a distance, like this was happening to someone else. Some other girl in some other town who'd been foolish enough to love a father who didn't deserve it. When it was done, Rowan folded the paper and tucked it into his coat. He pushed the pouch of coins toward Samuel, who snatched it up like a starving dog with a bone. Pleasure doing business, Samuel muttered, not meeting anyone's eyes. Rowan finally looked at Clara. Get your things, he said. Her voice broke. Whatever you want to bring. You've got 10 minutes. I'm not going anywhere with you, Clara whispered. You don't have a choice. Rowan's expression didn't change. Your father just sold you to me. Legal and binding. You can come willing or I can carry you. Either way, you're leaving Black Hollow today. The room spun. Clara's vision blurred and she realized with horror that she was crying. She swiped at her eyes furiously, hating herself for the weakness. I'll get my things, she said hoarsely. Good. She turned and stumbled toward the door. Behind her she heard the murmur of voices rising, men laughing, making jokes, already turning her tragedy into entertainment. Someone whistled. Someone else said something crude about wedding nights. Clara didn't look back. Okja. The house she'd grown up in was small, cramped, and smelled like mildew and old tobacco. Clara moved through it like a ghost, grabbing what little she owned. 2 dresses, a shawl, her mother's silver hairbrush, a book of poems she'd read so many times the spine was cracked. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely tie the bundle closed. Clara? She spun around. Her younger brother, Thomas, stood in the doorway. He was 14, all knobby knees and 2 long arms, his face still soft with childhood. His eyes were wide and red-rimmed. Is it true? He whispered. Did Pa really? Yeah. Clara's voice came out flat. It's true. But you can't just leave. I don't have a choice, Tommy. She crossed the room and grabbed his shoulders, squeezing hard. Listen to me. You stay away from the rusty nail, you hear me? You don't play cards, you don't drink, you don't end up like him. Where are you going? I don't know. She pulled him into a hug, pressing her face against his bony shoulder. He smelled like soap and wood smoke. But I'll be okay. I promise. It was a lie, but it was the kindest thing she could give him. When she pulled away, Thomas was crying. I'm sorry, Clara. I'm so sorry. It's not your fault. I should have stopped him. You're 14. This isn't on you. She kissed his forehead and grabbed her bundle. Take care of yourself, Tommy. Don't let him drag you down with him. She walked out before she could break down completely. Rowan was waiting outside the saloon with 2 horses, a big roan gelding and a smaller chestnut mare. He was tying down saddlebags when Clara approached, her bundle clutched against her chest like armor. That all you're bringing? He asked without looking up. It's all I have. He nodded and gestured to the mare. You can ride? Yes. Good. It's a long way up the mountain. Clara stared at the horse, then at Rowan, and something inside her snapped. I want to know what you're planning to do with me. Rowan straightened, his pale eyes meeting hers. Do with you? Don't play dumb. You bought me. I'm assuming you have expectations. His jaw tightened. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. Then, I'm taking you to my cabin. You'll have your own room. You'll be fed, clothed, and safe. Beyond that, I don't expect anything. You're lying. I'm not. Men don't pay $300 for nothing, Clara said bitterly. Rowan stepped closer and Clara forced herself not to flinch. He was tall enough that she had to tilt her head back to look at him. Your father owed me money. A lot of it. I could have taken his house, his land, everything. Instead, I took you. Not because I want a wife. Not because I want anything else. But because if I didn't, someone else would have. And they wouldn't have been kind about it. Clara's throat tightened. You expect me to thank you? No. He turned back to the horses. I expect you to get on that mare and ride. We've got 3 hours of daylight left, and I'd like to be halfway up the ridge before dark. Clara wanted to scream. She wanted to throw her bundle at his head and run. But where would she go? Back to her father, who'd already proven what she was worth to him? Into town, where everyone had just watched her get sold like cattle. She was trapped, so she climbed onto the mare. Ma! They rode in silence. Black Hollow shrank behind them, the buildings growing smaller and smaller until they were just smudges against the valley floor. The trail climbed steadily, winding through scrub pine and rocky outcrops. The air grew colder, sharper, carrying the scent of cedar and snow. Clara kept her eyes on the mare's ears, refusing to look at Rowan's broad back ahead of her. Her mind was a storm of fear and rage and grief. She kept thinking about her mother, dead 5 years now from fever, and wondering what she would have done. Would she have fought harder? Would she have found a way out? Or would she have told Clara to survive, no matter what it took? The sun was sinking toward the horizon when Rowan finally spoke. There's a creek up ahead. We'll stop to water the horses. Clara didn't answer. When they reached the creek, Rowan dismounted and led his gelding to the water. Clara stayed on the mare, her legs aching and her hands numb from gripping the reins. You should drink something, Rowan said, not looking at her. I'm fine. You're not. He pulled a canteen from his saddle and held it out. Drink. Clara glared at him. I said, I'm fine. And I said drink. His voice was still calm, but there was an edge to it now. You haven't had water in hours. Don't be stubborn. Stubborn? Clara's voice rose. You dragged me out of my home, away from my brother, away from everything I know, and you're calling me stubborn? I'm calling you dehydrated. He shook the canteen. Drink. Clara snatched the canteen from his hand and took a long swallow, hating him with every fiber of her being. The water was cold and tasted faintly of metal. She handed it back without a word. Thank you, Rowan said quietly. Clara ignored him. The cabin appeared just as the last light was fading from the sky. It sat in a clearing surrounded by towering pines, smoke curling from a stone chimney. It was bigger than Clara had expected, 2 stories with a covered porch and shuttered windows. Firewood was stacked neatly along one wall. A small barn stood off to the side, and beyond that Clara could see a garden plot, empty now, but clearly tended. It wasn't the savage den she'd imagined. Stables over there, Rowan said, nodding toward the barn. Put your mare in the second stall. There's hay and grain in the corner. Clara slid off the horse, her legs wobbling. She led the mare to the barn, her mind racing. The barn was clean, warm, and smelled like animals and dried grass. She unsaddled the mare clumsily, her hands were shaking again, and gave her hay and water. When she stepped back outside, Rowan was waiting on the porch. Come inside, he said. I'll show you where you'll sleep. Clara followed him into the cabin. The interior was strange, not because it was dirty or barbaric, but because it wasn't. The main room had a stone fireplace, a sturdy table with 2 chairs, shelves lined with books, actual books, more than Clara had ever seen in one place. There was a rug on the floor, worn but clean. Lanterns hung from the ceiling beams. Everything was orderly, practical, but not cold. Upstairs, Rowan said, gesturing to a ladder in the corner. Clara climbed up and found herself in a small loft. There was a bed, a real bed with a quilt and pillows, a trunk at the foot, and a small window overlooking the clearing. It was plain, but it was hers. You'll sleep here, Rowan said from below. I sleep downstairs. There's a latch on the inside of the door if you want to lock it. Clara turned to stare down at him. Why are you doing this? Doing what? Pretending to be decent. Rowan's expression didn't change. I'm not pretending. Get some rest. We'll talk in the morning. He turned and walked away before Clara could respond. Jack. That night, Clara lay in the unfamiliar bed and stared at the ceiling. She could hear Rowan moving around downstairs. The creak of floorboards, the clink of dishes, the soft crackle of the fire. Normal sounds. Human sounds. It didn't make sense. Men like Rowan Vane, men who lived alone in the mountains, who had reputations built on violence and isolation, didn't have libraries. They didn't give their captives private rooms with locks on the doors. Clara's mind kept circling back to the same question. What does he want? Because everyone wanted something. Her father had wanted money. The men in the saloon had wanted entertainment. Silas Mercer, the rancher's son who'd been sniffing around her for months, had wanted her body and her obedience. What did Rowan Vane want? She didn't sleep that night, but she locked the door anyway. Morning came gray and cold. Clara woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then reality crashed back and her stomach twisted. She climbed down the ladder slowly, her body stiff and aching. Rowan was at the stove, flipping bacon in a cast-iron skillet. He glanced at her briefly. Morning. Clara didn't answer. There's coffee in the pot, he said. Cups are on the shelf. Clara poured herself a cup and sat at the table, wrapping her hands around the warmth. The coffee was strong and bitter, nothing like the weak, watered-down stuff her father drank. Rowan set a plate in front of her, bacon, eggs, biscuits, real food, more food than she'd seen in weeks. Eat, he said. Clara stared at the plate. I'm not hungry. You haven't eaten since yesterday. Eat. Stop telling me what to do. Rowan sat down across from her, his own plate untouched. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you to take care of yourself. Why do you care? Because you're my responsibility now. I didn't ask to be your responsibility, Clara snapped. I know. Rowan picked up his fork. Eat or don't. I'm not going to force you. They sat in silence. Clara's stomach growled, betraying her. Finally, she grabbed a biscuit and tore into it. It was warm, buttery, and perfect. She hated how good it tasted. Rowan ate without looking at her. When they were finished, he stood and carried his plate to the basin. I've got work to do today. Firewood to chop, traps to check. You can stay inside or come with me. Your choice. What if I want to leave? Rowan turned to face her. You can't. Why not? Because it's 20 miles to the nearest town, and you don't know the trails. You'd be lost or dead before nightfall. So I'm a prisoner. You're safe. His voice was maddeningly calm. There's a difference. Clara stood, her chair scraping loudly. I hate you. I know, Rowan said, but you'll get used to it. He walked out, leaving Clara alone in the cabin. The days blurred together. Clara spent most of her time in the loft, reading the books Rowan had on his shelves, poetry, frontier histories, a battered copy of Robinson Crusoe. She avoided him as much as possible, speaking only when necessary. Rowan, for his part, didn't push. He worked from dawn to dusk, chopping wood, mending fences, checking traps. He cooked simple meals and left her portions on the table. He never touched her, never even tried. It was confusing. Clara had spent her whole life around men who took what they wanted. Her father. The gamblers in the saloon. Silas Mercer, who'd once cornered her behind the church and tried to kiss her, laughing when she shoved him away. But Rowan was different. He was quiet, respectful, almost gentle, and Clara didn't trust it. 2 weeks after she arrived, a storm rolled in. Snow fell thick and fast, blanketing the clearing and howling against the cabin walls. The temperature dropped so low that frost crept across the windows in delicate, jagged patterns. Rowan spent the day reinforcing the barn and bringing in extra firewood. By evening, he was soaked and shivering. Clara watched from the loft as he stripped off his wet coat and hung it by the fire. His shirt clung to his shoulders, and she could see the lean muscle beneath, the pale scars crisscrossing his arms. You're going to catch your death, she said, before she could stop herself. Rowan looked up, surprised. I'll be fine. You're shaking. I said I'll be fine. Clara came down the ladder, her arms crossed. Don't be stupid. You need to get warm. I am getting warm. He gestured to the fire. Clara rolled her eyes and grabbed a blanket from the trunk. She threw it at him. Sit. Rowan caught the blanket, frowning. What are you doing? Making sure you don't die before I figure out how to escape this place, Clara said flatly. Now sit. To her surprise, he obeyed. She poured him coffee and handed it over. Rowan took it, his fingers brushing hers. They were ice cold. Thank you, he said quietly. Clara didn't know what to say to that, so she sat across from him and stared into the fire. Oh, that night, the wind screamed like something alive. Clara woke to the sound of wood cracking. She bolted upright, heart pounding, and scrambled down the ladder. Rowan was already on his feet, pulling on his coat. Stay inside, he ordered. What's happening? Tree came down, probably hit the barn. He grabbed a lantern and headed for the door. Wait, Clara followed him. You can't go out there alone. I said stay inside. But Clara didn't listen. She grabbed her shawl and ran after him into the storm. The cold hit her like a fist. Snow stung her face, and the wind nearly knocked her off her feet. She could barely see Rowan ahead of her, his lantern swinging wildly. When they reached the barn, Clara's heart sank. A massive pine had crashed through the roof, splintering beams and scattering hay everywhere. The horses were screaming, terrified, trapped. Rowan handed Clara the lantern. Hold this. Don't move. He disappeared into the barn. Clara stood there, shaking, the lantern clutched in both hands. She could hear him inside, his voice low and soothing, calming the horses. Then the sound of wood being shoved aside, the creak of the stall door opening. The roan came out first, wild-eyed and snorting. Then the mare. Rowan emerged last, his face bleeding from a cut above his eyebrow. Get them into the cabin, he shouted over the wind. What? The cabin. They'll freeze out here. Clara didn't argue. She grabbed the mare's halter and led her through the snow. By dawn, the storm had passed. The cabin smelled like horses and wet wool. The roan and the mare stood in the corner, munching hay that Rowan had spread across the floor. Clara sat by the fire, wrapped in a blanket, exhausted. Rowan was at the table, stitching up the cut on his forehead with a needle and thread. His hands were steady despite the blood dripping down his face. You should let me do that, Clara said. I've done it before. You're making a mess of it. Rowan looked at her, then sighed and set the needle down. Fine. Clara crossed the room and knelt beside him. She threaded the needle again and leaned in close, tilting his face toward the light. His skin was rough under her fingers, scarred and weathered. This is going to hurt, she warned. I know. She worked quickly, her stitches small and neat. Rowan didn't flinch, didn't make a sound. You're tougher than you look, Clara muttered. So are you. She paused, needle hovering. What? You ran into a blizzard to help me save the horses, Rowan said. That takes guts. Clara's throat tightened. She tied off the last stitch and sat back. I didn't do it for you. I know. He met her eyes, but thank you anyway. For the first time since she'd arrived, Clara didn't know what to say. The weeks passed, the snow piled higher, and slowly, so slowly Clara almost didn't notice, the hatred began to crack. Not because Rowan asked for it, not because he expected it, but because every day he proved he was nothing like the stories. He read poetry by the fire. He carved delicate animals from cedar and left them on the windowsill. He cooked her favorite meals without asking what they were. He gave her space. He gave her freedom. And Clara began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, she'd been sold not into hell, but into something else entirely, something she didn't have a name for yet. But she was too afraid to hope, because hope, she'd learned, was the cruelest thing of all. The morning Clara found Rowan carving by the window changed something she couldn't name. She'd come down early, expecting to find him gone already, off checking traps or hauling water from the creek. Instead, he sat in the chair by the frosted glass, a block of pale cedar in one hand and a knife in the other. Wood shavings littered the floor around his boots like snow. Clara stopped at the bottom of the ladder, uncertain. I didn't know you were still here. Traps are frozen solid, Rowan said without looking up. Not worth the walk. She crossed to the stove and poured coffee, the silence stretching between them. It wasn't the hostile kind anymore. Not quite. More like two people sharing space who didn't know what else to do with each other. What are you making? Clara asked, surprising herself. Rowan held up the wood. It was taking shape, a wolf, mid-stride, ears pricked forward. The detail was remarkable. Each strand of fur had been carved with patience she wouldn't have expected from hands that size. "It's good," she said quietly. "My father taught me." Rowan turned the piece, studying it. Said a man should know how to make something beautiful, balance out all the ugly things he'd have to do to survive. Clara sat at the table, cupping her coffee. Was he right? I don't know. Rowan set the wolf on the windowsill next to 3 others, a deer, a hawk, a bear. But it keeps my hands busy when the winters get long. Clara studied him in the morning light. There was gray in his beard she hadn't noticed before, lines at the corners of his eyes that came from squinting into wind and sun. He looked older than she'd thought, 40, maybe. Old enough to have lived a whole life before she'd stumbled into it. "How long have you been up here?" she asked. 8 years. That's a long time to be alone. Rowan's knife stilled for a moment. It is. Don't you get lonely? He looked at her then, those winter water eyes measuring something she couldn't read. Every day, but lonely's better than the alternative. What alternative? Trusting people who don't deserve it. Claire wanted to ask what he meant, but the words died in her throat. Instead, she watched him carve, the rhythmic scrape of blade against wood filling the cabin like a heartbeat. When he finished, he held out the wolf. Here. What? It's yours, if you want it. Clara took the carving carefully, running her thumb over the smooth wood. It was warm from his hands. Why? Because you're still here, Rowan said simply, and you haven't burned the place down yet. Seems worth celebrating. Despite herself, Clara laughed, a short, startled sound. Rowan's mouth twitched like he might smile, but he turned back to the window before she could be sure. She kept the wolf in her pocket after that. Winter deepened, and with it, the strange domesticity between them shifted into something Clara couldn't define. She stopped eating meals in the loft, stopped locking her door at night. They fell into routines without discussing them. Rowan chopped wood before breakfast, Clara swept the floors and mended his shirts. He taught her how to set snares for rabbits, and she showed him how to make cornbread the way her mother used to. They didn't talk much, but the silence wasn't uncomfortable anymore. One afternoon, Clara found a book on the table, a collection of Whitman's poetry, the pages soft with age. A scrap of paper marked a page. She opened it and read the verse Rowan had underlined. I am large, I contain multitudes. She read it 3 times before closing the book and placing it back exactly where she'd found it. That night, as Rowan built up the fire, Clara said, You're not what they said you were. He paused, poker in hand. What did they say? That you were dangerous. That you killed a man in Black Hollow and disappeared into the mountains. That you were more animal than human. Rowan straightened slowly. And you believe that? I don't know what I believe. He set the poker down and sat across from her. For a long time, he just looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke. I did kill a man, he said quietly. 6 years ago. His name was Jack Harroway, and he was beating a woman to death behind the saloon. I pulled him off her, and he came at me with a knife, so I broke his neck. Clara's breath caught. The woman lived, Rowan continued, but the town didn't care about that. They cared that Jack's father was rich, and I was nobody. So I left before they could hang me for doing what was right. Why didn't you tell them the truth? I did. They didn't want to hear it. Rowan's jaw tightened. Your father was one of the men who wanted me dead, by the way. That's how he ended up owing me money. I loaned it to him years later when he came crawling up here, desperate. Told him I'd forgive the debt if he stayed sober and took care of his family. He didn't. Clara's hands clenched in her lap. So you bought me to punish him? No. Rowan leaned forward, his voice hard. I bought you because I knew what would happen if I didn't. Silas Mercer was at that table, Clara, and he was ready to pay double what I did. The name hit her like cold water. Silas was there? You didn't see him? She shook her head, her mind racing. Silas Mercer, the rancher's son with his oiled hair and expensive boots. He'd been circling her for months, showing up at church, offering to walk her home, touching her arm a little too long. She'd turned him down every time, and each rejection made his smile sharper. If he'd bought you, Rowan said quietly, you wouldn't have your own room. You wouldn't have a choice about anything, and your father would have taken the money and drunk himself to death anyway. Claire's throat burned. So you saved me. I gave you a chance to survive. That's not the same thing. Then what is it? It's me being selfish, Rowan said, because I couldn't stand the idea of watching another woman get destroyed by men who think they own the world. He stood and walked to the door, pulling on his coat. I'm going to check the barn. Get some sleep. He left before Clara could respond. She sat there in the firelight, the carved wolf heavy in her pocket, and felt something crack inside her chest. Not breaking, opening. The thaw came in March, slow and grudging. Ice melted off the eaves in long, dripping fingers. The creek swelled and roared. Patches of brown earth appeared through the snow like bruises. Clara stood on the porch one morning, breathing in air that finally didn't sting her lungs, and felt restless in a way she couldn't name. The cabin had become familiar, safe even, but the world beyond it was waking up, and part of her wanted to see it. I need to go into town, she told Rowan over breakfast. He looked up from his plate. Why? Because I've been here 3 months, and I haven't seen another human being except you. I need fabric for a new dress, flour, salt, normal things. I can get those for you. I want to get them myself. Clara set down her fork. I'm not asking permission. I'm telling you I'm going. Rowan studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. We'll go tomorrow. Together. I don't need an escort. You're going into a town that watched your father sell you. You think they're going to welcome you with open arms? His voice was flat. You don't go alone. Clara wanted to argue, but he was right. She hated that he was right. They rode into Black Hollow on a gray morning, the trail muddy and treacherous. Clara wore her cleanest dress and the shawl her mother had made, armor against the stairs she knew were coming. The town looked smaller than she remembered. Meaner. The buildings were shabby, paint peeling, windows grimy. Mud sucked at the horses' hooves as they made their way down the main street. People stopped to watch them pass. Clara kept her chin up, her hands steady on the reins. Beside her, Rowan rode like a wall, silent, solid, daring anyone to speak. They tied the horses outside Morrison's general store, and Clara stepped inside, Rowan a shadow at her back. Mrs. Morrison stood behind the counter, her face pinched and sour. Well, she said slowly, look who's back from the dead. I need flour, salt, and 3 yards of cotton, Clara said evenly. That's so. Mrs. Morrison didn't move. Heard you been living up the mountain with the hermit. That true? It's true. And you came back. The older woman's eyes glittered. Surprised you can still walk, given what they say about him. Clara's hands curled into fists. Before she could respond, Rowan stepped forward and placed a gold coin on the counter with a sharp click. The lady asked for flour, salt, and fabric, he said quietly. Not your opinion. Mrs. Morrison's face went red, but she moved. She gathered the supplies in silence, shoving them across the counter. That'll be $2. The coin's worth $5. Rowan didn't touch it. Keep the change. Consider it payment for keeping your mouth shut. They left with Mrs. Morrison sputtering behind them. Outside, Clara exhaled shakily. I shouldn't have come. Yes, you should have. Rowan loaded the supplies into his saddlebag. You can't hide forever, and they need to see you're not afraid. But I am afraid. Then you're a damn good liar. He glanced at her. You held your head up in there. That's more than most people could do. Before Clara could answer, a voice called out behind them. Well, well, Rowan Vane. They turned. Silas Mercer stood on the steps of the saloon, flanked by 2 men Clara didn't recognize. He was dressed like he always was, too fine for a frontier town, his coat tailored, his boots polished. His smile was sharp as a skinning knife. Heard you dragged Clara May up into the wilderness, Silas drawled. Thought maybe I should check on her, make sure she's being treated properly. She's fine, Rowan said flatly. Is that so? Silas descended the steps, his eyes sliding to Clara. You look thin, darling. He feeding you? Don't talk to her, Rowan said. Why not? She's a free woman, isn't she? Silas's smile widened. Unless you're keeping her locked up like an animal. Clara stepped forward before Rowan could move. I'm fine, Silas, and I'm not your darling. I never was. Now, Clara, go home. Her voice shook, but she forced the words out. I don't need your help. I don't want it. Silas's expression hardened. He looked at Rowan. You put her up to this? She's got her own mind, Rowan said. Not that you'd understand what that means. You son of a... Walk away, Mercer. Rowan's voice dropped into something cold and dangerous. While you still can. For a moment, Clara thought Silas might lunge. His hands flexed, his jaw tight, but something in Rowan's eyes made him hesitate. This isn't over, Silas said finally. Yeah, it is. Silas spat into the mud and stalked back into the saloon, his men trailing behind him. Clara realized she was shaking. Rowan's hand touched her elbow, brief, steadying. Let's go, he said quietly. They rode out of Black Hollow without looking back. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She kept seeing Silas's face, the way his smile had curdled into something ugly, the way he'd looked at her like she was a possession that had been stolen. She climbed down from the loft and found Rowan sitting by the fire, whittling another piece of cedar. Can't sleep? He asked, without looking up. No. Me neither. Clara sat across from him, pulling her knees to her chest. He's going to cause trouble, isn't he? Probably. Why does he care? I'm nobody. Rowan's knife paused. You're not nobody. And men like Silas don't like being told no. It's not about you, it's about control. So what do? We don't do anything. I handle it. This is my problem too. No. Rowan looked at her, his expression fierce. You've been through enough. I'm not letting him hurt you. You can't protect me from everything, Clara said softly. Maybe not. He went back to carving. But I'll die trying. The words hung between them, heavy and true. Clara's chest ached with something she didn't want to name. Why? She whispered. Why what? Why do you care so much? I'm nothing to you. A debt. A burden you didn't ask for. Rowan set down the knife. He was silent for so long Clara thought he wouldn't answer. Then he spoke, his voice rough. You remind me of someone. Who? My sister. He stared into the fire. She was 19 when she married a man our father picked for her. Nice house, nice family. Everyone said she was lucky. 6 months later, she walked into a river and didn't walk out. Claire's breath stopped. I found her, Rowan continued, pulled her out too late. And I swore I'd never let that happen again, never stand by while someone gets destroyed because they had no other choice. He looked at Clara, his eyes bright with old grief. So yeah, I care. Because you're still here, and you're fighting, and that matters. Clara's throat closed. She wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she reached across the space between them and took his hand. Rowan's fingers closed around hers, careful and warm. They sat like that until the fire burned low, and for the first time since her father sold her, Clara didn't feel alone. Spring arrived in earnest, bringing green to the valley and wildflowers to the meadows. Clara planted a garden behind the cabin, carrots, beans, lettuce, tomatoes. Rowan built her a fence to keep the deer out, and she caught him watching her work with an expression she couldn't read. They fell into new rhythms. Clara washed clothes in the creek while Rowan repaired the barn roof. He taught her to shoot his rifle, and she taught him how to braid leather into bridle reins. They cooked together, ate together, sat by the fire together. And slowly, so slowly Clara almost didn't notice, the hatred she'd carried turned into something else. One evening, she was mending a tear in his shirt when he came in from outside, sweaty and tired. You don't have to do that, he said, nodding at the shirt. I know. Then why are you? Clara looked up at him. Because you need a shirt that doesn't have holes in it, and because I want to. Rowan blinked, caught off guard. Thank you. You're welcome. He crossed to the basin and splashed water on his face. Clara watched the way his shoulders moved, the strength in his arms, the careful way he dried his hands on a towel. Rowan? Yeah? I'm glad I'm here. The words came out before she could stop them. I know that's strange, but I am. He turned slowly, water dripping from his beard. You mean that? I do. Something shifted in his expression, surprise maybe, or relief. I'm glad you're here too. Clara's heart kicked against her ribs. She looked down at the shirt in her lap, suddenly unable to meet his eyes. Get some rest, Rowan said quietly. You've been working all day. So have you. I'm used to it. Clara finished the mending and climbed to the loft, her mind spinning. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, and tried to understand what was happening to her. She wasn't supposed to feel safe here. She wasn't supposed to laugh at Rowan's dry observations or watch for him to come home in the evenings. She wasn't supposed to care whether he ate enough or slept well or smiled at the sunrise. But she did, and it terrified her. The first letter arrived in late April. Rowan came back from town with supplies and a folded piece of paper. He tossed it on the table without a word, his face dark. Clara picked it up. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. Rowan, I've heard troubling reports about Clara May Whitlock. As a concerned citizen and family friend, I feel obligated to ensure her well-being. I'll be visiting your property next week to confirm she's being properly cared for. Regards, Silas Mercer. Clara's hands shook. He can't do this. He can do whatever he wants. His father owns half the county. Rowan paced the cabin like a caged animal. He's testing me, seeing if I'll fold. What do? We tell him the truth, that you're here by choice, that you're safe. Rowan stopped and looked at her. But he won't believe it. He'll twist it into something ugly and spread it around town. Let him. Clara stood, her jaw set. I don't care what he says. You should. Words have power, Clara, enough power to destroy lives. Then we fight back. With what? We're two people living alone in the mountains. He's got money, men, influence, and we have the truth. Clara crossed to him, her eyes fierce. That has to count for something. Rowan stared at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked uncertain. I don't want you to get hurt. I'm already hurt. I've been hurt my whole life. Clara's voice broke. But I'm not afraid anymore, and I'm not running. Something blazed in Rowan's eyes. Pride, maybe, or something deeper. He reached out and cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. You're the bravest person I've ever met, he said hoarsely. Clara's breath caught. They stood there inches apart, the cabin warm and still around them. She could feel his heartbeat through his shirt, could see the pulse jumping in his throat. She wanted to kiss him. The realization hit her like lightning, but Rowan stepped back, his hand falling away. Get some sleep. We'll deal with Silas when he comes. He turned and walked outside, leaving Clara standing alone, her skin burning where he'd touched her. Silas arrived a week later with 4 men and a wagon. Clara heard them coming, hoofbeats and voices carrying across the clearing. She stepped onto the porch, Rowan at her side, and watched them approach. Silas dismounted with theatrical grace, his smile wide and false. Clara May, you're looking well. Better than I expected, given the circumstances. What do you want, Silas? Clara's voice was steady. I told you. I'm here to make sure you're being treated properly. He gestured to the cabin. May I come in? No, Rowan said flatly. Now that's hardly hospitable. You're not welcome here. State your business and leave. Silas's smile thinned. He turned to Clara. Are you here against your will? No. Has he harmed you in any way? No. Do you want to leave? Clara hesitated, not because she wanted to, but because the question felt like a trap. Silas's eyes gleamed, reading her silence as doubt. I'm fine, she said firmly. I'm staying. Are you sure? Silas took a step closer. Because if he's forcing you to say that, he's not forcing me to do anything. Clara moved to stand beside Rowan, close enough that their shoulders brushed. I'm here because I choose to be. Even though he bought you like cattle? He saved me from being sold to someone worse. Clara met Silas's gaze without flinching. Like you. Silas's face darkened. Careful, Clara. Or what? She stepped forward, fury burning through her fear. You'll tell everyone I'm corrupted? That I've been brainwashed by the mountain hermit? Go ahead. I don't care what Black Hollow thinks of me. I stopped caring the moment my father sold me in front of all of you. You're making a mistake, Silas said softly. The only mistake I made was being polite to you. Clara's voice cut like glass. Now get off our land. Silas stared at her, his jaw working. Then he turned to Rowan. You'll regret this. I doubt it. We'll see. Silas climbed back onto his horse. Enjoy your little kingdom, Vane. Winter's coming again, and mountains get lonely. He rode away, his men following. Clara stood there, shaking with adrenaline. Rowan's hand found hers and squeezed. You were magnificent, he said quietly. I'm terrified. That doesn't make it less magnificent. Clara looked up at him, and the expression on his face stole her breath. It wasn't just pride or gratitude. It was something raw and unguarded, something that looked like hope. Rowan, I know. He let go of her hand, stepping back. I know. But he didn't say what he knew, and Clara didn't ask. That night she lay awake and listened to the wind howling through the pines, and knew with cold certainty that Silas wasn't finished, and whatever came next would test more than her courage. It would test everything she'd started to believe about the man who'd bought her freedom and the life they'd built in the shadow of the mountains. The rumors started 3 days after Silas left. A rider came up the mountain trail, one of the trappers who worked the high country, a grizzled man named Dutch who'd always been decent to Rowan. He didn't dismount, just sat his horse at the edge of the clearing and called out, "Vane, you got a minute?" Rowan came out of the barn, wiping grease from his hands. Clara watched from the garden, her fingers buried in cool soil. Something in Dutch's posture made her stomach tighten. "What is it?" Rowan asked. "Need to warn you." Dutch shifted in his saddle, uncomfortable. "Mercer's been talking, telling folks down in Black Hollow that the girl ain't right, that you've got her under some kind of spell or worse. That's horseshit. I know it, you know it, but half the town's eating it up like Sunday supper." Dutch glanced toward Clara, tipped his hat. "Ma'am, no offense, but they're saying you've been corrupted. That mountain life's made you forget who you are." Clara stood, dirt falling from her hands. "I know exactly who I am. Like I said, no offense, just thought you should know what's being spread around." Dutch looked back at Rowan. "Mercer's got influence. His daddy's friends with the marshal. You might want to consider taking the girl back to town. Show folks she's fine. Put an end to the talk." "I'm not taking her anywhere she doesn't want to go," Rowan said flatly. "Then watch your back. That's all I'm saying." Dutch gathered his reins. "Men have been run out of the territory for less than what they're accusing you of." He rode off before either of them could respond. Clara walked to Rowan, her heart hammering. "This is my fault. No, it's Silas trying to save face. He wanted you, he didn't get you, so now he's making you into a cautionary tale." Rowan's jaw was tight. "It'll blow over." "What if it doesn't?" "Then we deal with it." But Clara could see the worry in his eyes, the way his hand kept drifting to the knife at his belt. He was scared, and that scared her more than anything Silas could say. The days that followed felt like waiting for a storm. Rowan checked the rifle more often, made sure the ammunition was dry. He taught Clara how to bar the door from the inside, how to climb out the loft window if she needed to. He didn't say why, but she understood. They were preparing for something neither of them wanted to name. Clara threw herself into work, weeding the garden, preserving vegetables, scrubbing the cabin until her hands were raw. Anything to keep her mind from spiraling. But at night, lying in the loft, she couldn't stop imagining men on horseback, torches in the dark, Rowan's blood on the cabin floor. She started sleeping with the carved wolf under her pillow. One evening, Rowan came in from checking the traps empty-handed and angry. He slammed the door harder than necessary, making Clara jump. "What happened?" she asked. "Someone's been cutting my lines, all of them." He threw his coat over the chair. 5 traps destroyed, the game scattered." "Silas?" "Who else?" Rowan paced the cabin like a caged wolf. "He's trying to starve us out, make it impossible to stay up here. We have supplies. For now. But winter's 6 months away, and I can't hunt if every trap I set gets destroyed." He stopped, running a hand through his hair. "He's escalating." Clara's throat went dry. "What do we do?" "I don't know." And that admission, that Rowan Vane, who'd survived alone in these mountains for 8 years, didn't know, was the most frightening thing Clara had heard. She crossed to him and took his hands. They were cold, rough with calluses. "We'll figure it out." "I should have never brought you here," Rowan said roughly. "Should have known this would happen, that they'd come after us." "You saved my life. Did I? Or did I just trade one prison for another?" His eyes were haunted. "You can't leave without me. Can't go to town without being harassed. Can't even exist without people talking. What kind of life is that?" "It's mine." Clara squeezed his hands hard enough to hurt. "And I chose it. I chose you." The words hung between them, too raw and too true. Rowan stared at her, something breaking open in his expression. "Clara!" A sound outside cut him off. Hoofbeats. Multiple riders. They both froze. "Get upstairs," Rowan said quietly. "No. Get upstairs and bar the window." He was already reaching for the rifle. "If anything happens, you climb out and you run. You don't look back. You don't wait for me. You just run. Understand?" "I'm not leaving you." "Clara!" He grabbed her shoulders, his grip fierce. "Promise me. Please." She nodded, her throat too tight to speak. Clara climbed the ladder as Rowan moved to the door, rifle in hand. She crouched by the loft window, her heart slamming against her ribs, and watched through the gap in the shutters. 6 men rode into the clearing. Silas at the front, his face cold and satisfied. The others were ranch hands, big hard-faced men who looked like they'd been promised money or worse for this visit. Rowan stepped onto the porch, the rifle cradled loosely in his arms. "You're trespassing, Mercer." "Am I?" Silas dismounted slowly, deliberately. "Funny thing, Vane, I've been talking to folks in Black Hollow, old-timers. Turns out this land? It's not actually yours. It belongs to the territory, which means you're squatting." "That's a lie." "Is it? Show me your deed." Rowan said nothing. "That's what I thought." Silas smiled. "See, I did some research. This property gets auctioned next month, and I intend to buy it, which means you'll need to vacate, you and your little companion, over my dead body. That can be arranged." Silas gestured to his men. "But I'm a reasonable man, so I'm giving you a choice. You leave Clara May here with us. Let us return her to her family, where she belongs, and I'll let you walk away. Hell, I'll even pay you for your trouble. $500. More than you paid for her." Clara's hands clenched into fists. "She's not for sale," Rowan said. "Everything's for sale, Vane. You of all people should know that." "Get off my land." "Your land?" Silas laughed. "You really are delusional. Boys, I think Mr. Vane needs help understanding his situation." The men dismounted, spreading out. They weren't armed, not visibly, but they didn't need to be. 6 against 1 was enough. Rowan raised the rifle. "Take one more step, and I'll put a hole in you." "You won't." Silas's voice was confident. "Because the moment you pull that trigger, you're a murderer. And there are 6 witnesses who'll swear you shot an unarmed man in cold blood. You'll hang Vane, and Clara will end up exactly where I want her." Clara couldn't breathe. She watched Rowan's finger rest on the trigger, watched the calculation in his eyes. He was trapped. They both were. "Let me talk to her," Silas said. "Just let me talk to Clara. If she says she wants to stay, I'll leave. You have my word." "Your word's worthless." "Then what choice do you have?" Silas spread his hands. "You can shoot me and die, or you can let me talk to her and maybe, just maybe, we can all walk away from this." Rowan's shoulders were rigid. After a long, terrible moment, he lowered the rifle. "Clara, come down." "No," she whispered. "Come down." His voice was gentle but firm. "It's okay." It wasn't okay. Nothing about this was okay. But Clara climbed down the ladder anyway because the alternative was watching Rowan die. She stepped onto the porch, and Silas's smile widened. "There she is." He climbed the steps, stopping just out of Rowan's reach. "Clara May, you look tired, thin. This life isn't good for you." "I'm fine. Are you?" "Because everyone in Black Hollow is worried sick. Your brother asked about you just yesterday. Asked when you were coming home." Clara's chest tightened. "Tommy? He misses you. Your father does too, in his way. They want you back." Silas's voice softened, turned persuasive. "You don't belong here, Clara. You belong with people who care about you, with civilization, not hidden away like some animal." "I'm not hidden. I'm choosing to be here." "Because he's manipulated you." Silas gestured to Rowan. "Look at him. He bought you like property and dragged you to the middle of nowhere. He's isolated you from everyone you love. That's not protection, Clara. That's possession." "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I? Then answer me this. If you're so free, why can't you leave? Why can't you go to town without him watching over you? Why do you have to hide up here like you've done something wrong?" The words hit like fists, because they weren't entirely untrue. Clara couldn't leave without Rowan, couldn't go to town without being stared at, judged, whispered about. She was free, but only within the boundaries of this mountain. Beyond them, she was still the girl who'd been sold. "Clara," Rowan said quietly, "don't listen to him." "Why not?" Silas turned to him. "Afraid she'll realize the truth? That you're no better than her father?" "I never claimed to be." Rowan's voice was steady. "But I gave her a choice, and I'll keep giving her that choice every day for as long as she wants to stay." Pretty words, but words don't change facts. Silas looked back at Clara. "Come with me, right now. No one will judge you. We'll tell everyone you were scared, that you didn't know what else to do. You'll be welcome back, forgiven. You can start over." Clara's mind raced. Part of her, the scared, exhausted part, wanted to say yes, wanted to go back to something familiar, even if familiar meant cruel, because at least she understood cruelty. At least she knew how to survive it. But then she looked at Rowan, at the man who'd given her poetry and carved wolves and freedom within the walls of his cabin, who'd stood between her and violence more than once, who'd never asked for anything except her safety. And she realized something. She wasn't afraid of Silas. She wasn't even afraid of Black Hollow. She was afraid of losing what she'd found here. "No," Clara said. Silas blinked. "What?" "I said no." Clara stepped closer to Rowan, her voice strengthening. "I'm staying. Not because I'm manipulated or scared or confused, but because this is where I want to be. With him." "You're making a mistake." "Maybe. But it's my mistake to make." Clara met Silas's eyes without flinching. "You need to leave. Now." Silas's expression went cold. "Fine. But don't come crying to me when this all falls apart. Because it will, Clara. And when it does, you'll have no one to blame but yourself." He turned and walked down the steps. His men followed, climbing back onto their horses. But as Silas mounted, he looked back at Rowan. "You think you've won, but you haven't. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you are. A predator, a monster. And when they come for you, and they will, you'll have nothing. No land, no reputation, no life. And she'll be left with the consequences of trusting you." "Get out," Rowan said quietly. Silas rode away, his men trailing behind like wolves. Clara stood there, shaking. Rowan set the rifle down and pulled her into his arms. She went willingly, burying her face against his chest. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For what?" "For bringing this on you, for making everything complicated." "You didn't do anything wrong." Rowan's hand cupped the back of her head. "And you're not a complication. You're—" He stopped. Clara pulled back to look at him. "I'm what?" Rowan's eyes were bright and fierce. "You're everything." The words knocked the air from her lungs. She stared at him, and he stared back, and the space between them felt charged with something Clara couldn't name but desperately wanted. "Rowan, I know we can't," he said roughly. "I know this whole thing is wrong and I shouldn't feel this way, but I do, and I'm tired of pretending I don't." "Feel what way?" "Like I'd burn the world down to keep you safe." He let go of her, stepping back. "Like you're the only thing that's mattered in 8 years. Like I don't deserve you, but I'm selfish enough to want you anyway." Clara's heart was going to break through her ribs. "You think I don't feel the same way?" Rowan went still. "What? You think I stayed because I had no choice? You think I defended you to Silas because I was being brave?" Clara's voice cracked. "I did it because the thought of leaving you makes me want to die. Because you're the first person who's ever made me feel like I matter, like I'm worth something." "Clara, I love you." The words came out broken and fierce. "I don't know when it happened or how, but I do. And I'm not sorry for it." Rowan stared at her like she'd just split the sky open. Then he crossed the space between them in 2 strides and kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't careful. It was desperate and hungry and real. His hands in her hair, her fingers gripping his shirt, both of them trying to get closer. Clara had never been kissed before, but she didn't care. This was right. This was everything. When they broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "Tell me I didn't imagine that," Rowan said hoarsely. "You didn't. Tell me you mean it. That you're not saying it because you're scared or because you think you have to. I mean it." Clara cupped his face. "I love you, and I'm staying, no matter what Silas does, no matter what anyone says. I'm staying." Rowan closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. "I don't deserve you." "Yes, you do." I bought you, Clara. I paid money for you like you were an object. You gave me a life. Clara's voice was fierce. You gave me freedom and safety and a chance to figure out who I am without someone telling me. That's not ownership. That's the most decent thing anyone's ever done for me. Rowan opened his eyes, and they were wet. I love you too. I've loved you since you stood up to your father in that saloon, since you refused to break even when you had every reason to. Clara kissed him again, slower this time, tasting salt and something sweet. When she pulled back, she was smiling despite everything. So what do we do now? We fight. Rowan's jaw set. Silas wants to destroy us? We make sure he fails. How? I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Together. Clara nodded. She believed him. Against all logic and sense, she believed they'd find a way. But that night, lying in the loft with Rowan's voice drifting up from below, he'd insisted she take the bed while he slept on the floor downstairs, propriety mattering even now. Clara couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Something worse than rumors or threats or angry men on horseback. And when it came, it would test more than their courage. It would test whether love was enough to survive in a world that wanted them broken. They came for Clara on a moonless night 2 weeks later. She woke to silence. The wrong kind. The kind that meant something was missing. No wind in the pines, no owl calls. Even the creek seemed to hold its breath. Clara sat up in the loft, her skin prickling. Below she could hear Rowan moving, the creak of floorboards as he crossed to the window. He'd been sleeping lighter since Silas's visit, waking at every sound. "Rowan?" she whispered. "Stay quiet." Clara climbed down the ladder, her feet bare on the cold wood. Rowan stood by the window, rifle in hand, staring into the darkness. His face was drawn tight. "What is it?" "I don't know. Something's wrong." He turned to her. "Get dressed. Boots, coat, everything, and stay away from the windows." Clara's heart kicked into her throat, but she did as he said. She pulled on her dress, laced her boots with shaking fingers, grabbed her shawl. By the time she finished, Rowan had moved to the door, listening. Then she heard it, the soft thud of hoofbeats, multiple horses, moving slow and deliberate. "They're surrounding us," Rowan said quietly. 6, maybe 8 riders, coming from all sides. "Silas?" "Probably." He checked the rifle, his movements precise. "Clara, listen to me. When I say run, you go out the back window. There's a trail that leads down to the creek. Follow it north for half a mile, then cut east. You'll hit the main road eventually. Flag down whoever you can and get to the next town. I'm not leaving you. You are." His voice was steel. "Because if they take you, I can't protect you, and I need to know you're safe." "Rowan?" a voice called out from the darkness, amplified and strange. "Rowan Vane, we know you're in there." It wasn't Silas. It was deeper, older, a voice with authority. Clara recognized it with sinking dread. Marshall Cutting, Black Hollow's law, a man who'd been in Silas's father's pocket for years. "We're here on behalf of the territory," Cutting continued. "You're harboring Clara May Whitlock against her will. Send her out, and we'll go peacefully." Rowan's jaw clenched. He moved to the door, keeping the rifle low. "She's not being held against her will." "That's not what we've been told. Her family filed a complaint. Said you coerced her into staying, that she's been seen exhibiting signs of duress." "That's a lie." "Then she can tell us herself. Send her out, Vane. Let her speak freely without you hovering over her." Clara crossed to the door. "I'll go. I'll tell them." Rowan grabbed her arm. "No, the moment you step outside, they'll take you, and I won't be able to stop them." "Then what do we do?" "We hold." His eyes met hers, fierce and afraid. "We hold until daylight. They won't try anything too bold in front of witnesses." "There are no witnesses up here." "I know." Rowan's hand tightened on the rifle. "But they don't know that we know what they're planning." Another voice cut through the dark. This one was familiar, dripping with false concern. Silas. "Clara, it's me. I'm here with the marshal and your brother. Tommy's worried sick about you. Just come out and talk to us. That's all we're asking." Clara's breath caught. "Tommy's here?" "It's a trick," Rowan said. "They're using him to get to you." "But what if he's really—" "Clara May!" That was Tommy's voice, young and frightened. "Clara, please. Pa's real sick. He needs you to come home." Clara's chest felt like it was caving in. She moved toward the door, but Rowan stepped in front of her. "Don't," he said quietly. "I know it hurts, but the moment you go out there, this is over, and not in the way you want. He's my brother, and he's being used. They brought him here to break you because they know you'd do anything for him." Rowan's voice was gentle, but unyielding. "I'm sorry, Clara, but you can't go." Outside, the marshal spoke again. "You've got 1 minute to send her out, Vane. After that, we're coming in, and we're authorized to use force if necessary." "Force?" Clara's voice cracked. They can do whatever they want. Silas's father probably paid them well enough to ignore the law." Rowan moved to the back of the cabin, checking the window. "When I give the signal, you run. I'll hold them off as long as I can." "No, Clara." He grabbed her shoulders, his eyes burning into hers. "I need you to survive this. Whatever happens to me, you survive. You get to the next town, you tell them what happened, and you don't let Silas win. Understand?" Tears blurred her vision. "I can't lose you." "You won't. I'm too stubborn to die." He kissed her hard and fast. "I love you. Now get ready to run." But before Clara could move, she heard the sound of breaking glass. Something crashed through the front window, a burning torch that landed on the floor, flames spreading across the dry wood. Then another through the side window, and another. "They're burning us out!" Rowan shoved Clara toward the back. "Go, now!" Clara ran to the window, climbing onto the sill. Behind her, smoke was already filling the cabin, thick and choking. She could hear men shouting outside, hear Tommy crying. She dropped to the ground and ran. The forest was a black maze of shadows and branches that grabbed at her clothes. Clara's lungs burned as she stumbled down the trail, following the creek like Rowan had told her. Behind her, orange light flickered through the trees. The cabin, her home, burning. She wanted to go back. Every instinct screamed at her to turn around, to help Rowan, to not leave him alone against however many men had come for them. But his voice echoed in her head. "You survive." So she ran. The trail twisted and climbed, her boots slipping on loose rocks. She could hear hoofbeats behind her. Someone was following. Clara pushed harder, her breath coming in ragged gasps, her side cramping. Then a hand grabbed her from behind. Clara screamed and lashed out, her elbow connecting with something solid. A man grunted, and she broke free, but two more appeared from the trees. Ranch hands, Silas's men. "Got her!" one of them yelled. Clara tried to run, but they were faster. Strong hands grabbed her arms, yanked her back. She fought, kicking, biting, scratching, but there were too many of them. "Feisty little thing," one of them muttered, wrestling her wrists together. "No wonder Vane kept her locked up." "I wasn't locked up, you bastard!" Someone shoved a cloth into her mouth, muffling her words. They bound her hands with rough rope, tied another length around her ankles. Clara thrashed, tried to scream through the gag, but it was useless. They threw her over a horse like a sack of grain and rode back toward the clearing. The cabin was a roaring inferno now, flames reaching toward the sky. Clara's eyes burned, from smoke, from tears, from rage. She searched desperately for Rowan, praying he'd gotten out, but she couldn't see him anywhere. Then she did. He was on his knees in front of the burning cabin, held there by 3 men. His face was bloody, his shirt torn. Marshal Cutting stood over him, gun drawn. "You'll hang for this, Vane," Cutting said. "Kidnapping, corruption, resisting lawful authority. That's enough rope for 10 men. Rowan's head lifted and his eyes found Clara. For a moment, everything else disappeared. The fire, the men, the horses, all of it faded. There was only him, looking at her with such fierce love and desperate apology that Clara's heart shattered. "Clara," he tried to say, but one of the men hit him across the face. "Shut up!" Silas rode up then, his expression triumphant. He dismounted and walked to the horse where Clara was draped, pulling her head up by her hair so he could see her face. "Look at you," he said softly. "All that pride. And where did it get you? Your home's burning. Your monster's beaten. And you're exactly where I knew you'd end up. With me." Clara tried to bite him through the gag. Silas laughed and let her go. He turned to the marshal. "Take Vane down to the old mining camp. We'll hold a hearing there tomorrow. Let everyone see what happens to men who think they're above the law." "What about the girl?" Cutting asked. "She comes with us. We'll keep her safe until the hearing, make sure she understands what's at stake. And then? And then she goes home, to her family, where she belongs. Silas mounted his horse. Move out. They rode through the forest in a grim procession. Clara, still bound and gagged, watched Rowan being dragged behind a horse, stumbling and bleeding. Tommy rode near the front, his face buried in his hands, shoulders shaking. The mining camp was an abandoned relic from the Silver Rush, a collection of rotting structures and rusted equipment. They'd set up torches around a central clearing, casting everything in hellish light. The men threw Rowan to the ground in the center. Someone had brought chairs, arranged them like a makeshift courtroom. The marshal took the center seat, flanked by two other men Clara didn't recognize. Silas stood to the side, arms crossed, watching everything with cold satisfaction. They untied Clara's ankles but left her hands bound. Someone removed the gag, and she immediately started shouting. "This isn't legal. You can't just—" "Quiet," the marshal said. "You'll get your chance to speak." "My chance? You burned our home. You attacked us in the middle of the night." "We executed a lawful rescue of a kidnapping victim." Cutting's voice was bored, like he'd rehearsed this. "Everything we did was by the book." "That's a lie, and you know it." A hand grabbed her arm. "Tommy." He pulled her aside, away from the men. His face was streaked with tears and dirt. "Clara, stop," he whispered. "Please just stop." "Tommy, they're going to kill him." I know, and I'm sorry. I didn't know they were going to do this. They told me Pa was dying, that you needed to come home. I didn't know they'd—" His voice broke. "I'm so sorry." Clara wanted to rage at him, to scream that he'd betrayed her, but looking at his young, terrified face, she couldn't. He was just a kid who'd been lied to and used. "It's not your fault," she said, her voice cracking. "But you have to help me. Please, Tommy, tell them the truth. Tell them I wasn't kidnapped." "I already tried. They won't listen." Tommy's hands shook. "Silas paid them, Clara, paid them a lot. And Pa signed papers saying Rowan took you against your will, that the marriage wasn't legal because you weren't in your right mind when it happened. That's insane." "I know, but they don't care about the truth. They care about what Silas wants." Tommy grabbed her shoulders. "You need to play along. Tell them what they want to hear. Say you were scared, that Rowan forced you. Maybe they'll let him live if you do." "I'm not lying about him." "Then he's going to die." Tommy's voice rose, desperate. "Is that what you want? To watch him hang because you're too stubborn to lie?" Clara stared at her brother, her mind racing. Could she do it? Could she stand in front of everyone and destroy the man she loved to save him? Before she could answer, the marshal called out, "Bring the girl forward." Someone shoved Clara toward the center. She stumbled but kept her balance, lifting her chin. Around the clearing, more people had gathered. Men from town, ranch hands, even some women. They stared at her with a mix of pity and disgust. She was a spectacle, a cautionary tale, the girl who'd been corrupted by the mountain hermit. "Clara May Whitlock," Marshal Cutting said formally, "you stand before this tribunal as a victim and a witness. We're here to determine the fate of Rowan Vane, accused of kidnapping, false imprisonment, and moral corruption. Your testimony will be taken into account." Clara looked at Rowan. He knelt in the dirt, held by two men, his face a mask of bruises and blood. But his eyes were clear and fierce and fixed on her. "Don't," he said quietly. "Whatever they ask you, don't." "Silence," one of the men said, hitting him again. Clara flinched, her hands curled into fists despite the ropes. The marshal leaned forward. "Tell us, Miss Whitlock, did Rowan Vane take you to his cabin against your will?" Clara's throat was dry. She could feel the weight of every eye on her, could hear the hungry silence. They wanted her to break, wanted her to confirm their worst beliefs about Rowan. She thought about lying, about saying what they wanted to hear, about playing the victim to save the man she loved. But then she remembered Silas's words in the cabin. "You'll have no one to blame but yourself." And she realized something. If she lied now, if she betrayed Rowan to save him, he'd survive. But they'd both lose, because the lie would poison everything they'd built. It would prove that Silas was right, that she couldn't be trusted to make her own choices, that she needed to be rescued from herself. And Clara was done being rescued by men who wanted to own her. "No," she said clearly. The marshal frowned. "No? No, he didn't take me against my will. I went with him because staying in Black Hollow would have been worse. Claire's voice grew stronger. My father sold me to pay his debts. Rowan bought me to keep me from being sold to someone else, someone like Silas Mercer. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Silas's jaw tightened. That's... The marshal started. I'm not finished. Clara stepped forward, her eyes blazing. Rowan gave me my own room. He never touched me without permission. He taught me to read poetry and hunt and survive in the mountains. He made me feel like a human being instead of property. And when I told him I loved him, he loved me back. Not because I was convenient or available, but because he saw me. Really saw me. You don't know what you're saying, Cutting said. You've been isolated, manipulated. I know exactly what I'm saying, Clara's voice cracked. I'm saying that Rowan Vane is the most decent man I've ever known. And if you kill him, you're not upholding the law. You're murdering an innocent man because Silas Mercer's pride got hurt. The clearing erupted, people shouting, arguing, some agreeing with her, most against. Silas stepped forward, his face dark with rage. She doesn't know what she's saying. She's clearly been corrupted. Clara whirled on him. Is that your favorite word, Silas? Because that's what you think, isn't it? That a woman who refuses you must be broken or crazy or corrupted, that she couldn't possibly have her own mind. You're embarrassing yourself. No, you're embarrassing yourself. Clara moved closer, close enough that the men holding Rowan tensed. You wanted me. You couldn't have me. So you turned me into this victim, this story, because that's easier than accepting that I chose someone else, someone better. Silas's hand shot out and grabbed her face, his fingers digging into her jaw. You stupid little... Rowan roared. He ripped free from the men holding him, moved with a violence Clara had never seen, and slammed into Silas. They went down in a tangle of limbs and fury, Rowan's fists connecting with bone and flesh. Everything exploded into chaos. Men rushed forward to pull them apart. Women screamed. Someone fired a gun into the air. Clara tried to get to Rowan, but hands grabbed her, held her back. Stop, she screamed. Stop it, you're going to kill him. It took 6 men to drag Rowan off Silas. He was still fighting, still trying to get free, his face twisted with rage. Silas lay in the dirt, his nose shattered, blood streaming down his face. Enough! Marshal Cutting stood, his gun drawn. This is over. Rowan Vane, you're under arrest for assault, and come morning, you'll hang for it. No! Clara thrashed against the hands holding her. No, you can't. Take her away, Cutting ordered. Lock her in one of the old shacks until this is done. No, Rowan! Rowan! They dragged her backward, and the last thing Clara saw was Rowan's face, bloody, broken, but still looking at her with that same fierce love. Then they shoved her into a dark, rotting building and barred the door. Clara pounded on the wood until her hands were raw, screaming until her voice gave out. But no one came. No one listened. She sank to the floor, her body shaking with sobs she couldn't control. They were going to kill him. At sunrise, they'd put a noose around his neck and kill the only person who'd ever made her feel alive. And she was trapped. Hours passed. The darkness outside the cracks in the walls began to lighten, dawn creeping closer. Clara sat with her back against the wall, her mind numb with exhaustion and grief. She thought about Rowan's hands carving wood by the window, about his quiet voice reading poetry, about the way he'd looked at her the first time she'd said she loved him, like she'd given him something he'd never expected to have. She thought about dying here, about giving up, about letting Silas win because she didn't have the strength to fight anymore. But then she heard it, howling, low and distant at first, then closer. Wolves. A whole pack of them, their voices rising in the pre-dawn dark. Clara stood, her heart hammering. She moved to the crack in the wall and pressed her eye to it. The camp was in chaos, men shouting, pointing toward the trees, torches swinging wildly as shadows moved between the buildings. And in the center of it all, the wolves. They circled the clearing, 6, 8, maybe 10 of them. Gray ghosts with eyes like mirrors. They didn't attack. They just watched, their presence alone enough to send grown men scrambling for weapons. And then Clara saw him. Rowan. Somehow, he'd gotten free. He stood at the edge of the torchlight, bloodied and swaying, but standing. And the wolves moved with him, flanking him like soldiers. Clara's breath caught. She'd heard stories, whispers about the mountain hermit who could call wolves, who moved through the forest like he was part of it. She'd dismissed them as superstition. But watching Rowan now, watching the wolves respond to his movements like they knew him, she wondered if maybe the stories had been true all along. Rowan's voice cut through the chaos, rough and commanding. "Let her go!" Silence fell. Every eye turned to him. Marshal Cutting stepped forward, his gun shaking. "Vane, stand down or I'll shoot." "No, you won't." Rowan took a step forward, and the wolves moved with him. "Because the moment you do, they'll tear you apart, and everyone here knows it." "You can't control wild animals." One of the wolves snarled, a sound that turned Clara's blood cold. "Can't I?" Rowan's eyes were ice and fury. "Let her go." The marshal looked around desperately. His men were backing away, some dropping their weapons. Even Silas, still bleeding from his broken nose, looked terrified. "Fine," Cutting said hoarsely. "Fine. Someone let her out." No one moved. "Now!" A man ran to the shack and threw open the door. Clara stumbled out, her legs weak, her vision blurry. She saw Rowan and started toward him. "Clara, wait," someone said. But she didn't wait. She ran. The wolves parted as she passed, their eyes tracking her but their bodies still. Clara crashed into Rowan, and his arms came around her, solid and real. "I've got you," he murmured into her hair. "I've got you." "How?" Clara pulled back to look at him. "How did you—" "Later." He turned to face the crowd, keeping Clara behind him. "We're leaving, and if anyone tries to stop us, they'll regret it." "This isn't over, Vane," Silas spat, blood dripping from his chin. "I'll hunt you down." "Try it." Rowan's voice was quiet, deadly. "And I promise you won't live long enough to regret it." He whistled, low and sharp, and the wolves melted back into the trees. Then he took Clara's hand and led her into the forest, away from the torches and the crowd and the nightmare they'd barely survived. Behind them, the mining camp dissolved into arguments and fear. But Clara didn't look back. She was too busy holding on to the man who'd walked through fire and wolves and violence to save her, and promising herself that no matter what came next, she'd never let him face it alone again. They walked through the forest for hours, neither of them speaking. Rowan led the way, his hand gripping Clara's so tightly she thought her bones might break. But she didn't complain. The pain meant he was real, that they were both alive, that somehow they'd made it out of that nightmare. Dawn broke gray and cold, filtering through the pines in weak shafts of light. Clara's legs were shaking, her lungs burning, but she kept moving. Behind them, she could still hear distant shouts, men arguing, horses being saddled. The chaos they'd left behind hadn't settled yet. "Are they following us?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "Not yet." Rowan didn't slow down. "But they will, soon as Silas gets his nerve back." "The wolves are gone. They don't stay once the danger passes. They're wild, Clara. Not pets, not soldiers." He glanced back at her, and for the first time since they'd escaped, she saw how exhausted he was. Blood crusted his temple, his lip was split, and he was favoring his left leg. "But they remember me. From when I first came to these mountains. I helped one of them out of a trap once. Fed a few others during a hard winter. They don't owe me anything, but sometimes they show up when I need them." Clara's throat tightened. "You could have died back there." "So could you." "I mean it, Rowan. They were going to hang you at dawn. How did you even get free?" "Marshall's men aren't as smart as they think." Rowan's jaw tightened. "They tied me to a post outside one of the shacks. Figured I was too beaten to cause trouble. But the knots were sloppy, and one of them left a knife on a supply crate." He held up his raw, bleeding wrists. "Took me 2 hours to cut through the rope. By the time I got loose, the wolves had already picked up my scent. And they just came?" "They came." Rowan stopped walking and turned to face her. His eyes were haunted. "But Clara, you need to understand something. What you did back there, standing up to the marshal, to Silas, to everyone, that was the bravest and most foolish thing I've ever seen. I wasn't going to lie about you. You should have." His voice cracked. "You should have told them whatever they wanted to hear. Saved yourself. And let them kill you? Let them turn you into a monster? Clara stepped closer, her hand coming up to touch his battered face. No. I'd rather die telling the truth than live with a lie. They could have killed you too. I know. Clara's fingers traced the cut above his eyebrow, gentle despite the rage still burning in her chest. But I meant what I said. I love you, and I'm not ashamed of it. Not anymore. Not ever. Rowan closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. We can't go back to the cabin. It's gone. And even if it wasn't, they'd come for us. Then where do we go? North, across the territorial line into the next county. Find somewhere they can't touch us. He opened his eyes. It'll be hard, Clara. Harder than anything we've done so far. We'll be starting over with nothing. We have each other. That's not enough to survive a winter. It's enough for me. Clara's voice was firm. I don't care if we have to live in a cave or a lean-to or under the stars. As long as I'm with you, it's enough. Rowan stared at her like she'd just handed him something precious and fragile. Then he kissed her, slow and deep and full of everything they'd been through. When they broke apart, both of them were shaking. We should keep moving, he said quietly. Put more distance between us and them. Clara nodded, and they walked on. They reached the territorial line 3 days later. 3 days of walking through forest and over ridges, sleeping in hollow logs and under rock overhangs, eating whatever Rowan could catch or forage. Clara's dress was torn, her boots were falling apart, and every muscle in her body screamed, but she didn't complain. Rowan was in worse shape, limping badly now, his face gray with pain and exhaustion. On the morning of the 4th day, they stumbled into a settlement called Pine Haven. It was smaller than Black Hollow, quieter, built around a sawmill and a general store. People stared as they walked down the main street, two ragged strangers who looked like they'd crawled out of hell. Rowan led Clara to the store and used the last of his money to buy bread, cheese, and bandages. The shopkeeper, an older woman with kind eyes, took one look at them and insisted they sit down. You two been through something bad, she said, not quite a question. You could say that, Rowan muttered. Anyone chasing you? He hesitated. Maybe. The woman nodded slowly. Well, you're across the line now. Black Hollow's marshal don't have jurisdiction here, and our sheriff don't take kindly to outsiders stirring up trouble. She handed Clara a cup of water. You need a place to stay? We don't have money, Clara said quietly. Didn't ask if you did, asked if you needed a place. The woman studied them both. Name's Ruth. I got a spare room above the store. Ain't much, but it's warm and dry. You can stay there while you figure out your next move. Clara's eyes burned with tears. Why would you help us? Because I've been where you are. Ruth's expression softened. 30 years ago, I ran from a man who thought he owned me, came to this town with nothing but the clothes on my back, and someone helped me. So now I help others when I can. She looked at Rowan. You treat her right? I try. Then that's good enough for me. Ruth stood. Come on, let's get you cleaned up. The room above the store was small but clean. A bed, a chair, a wash basin, and a window overlooking the street. Ruth brought them hot water, soap, and a change of clothes. Rest, she ordered. I'll bring food later. When she left, Clara and Rowan just stood there, staring at each other. They were filthy, exhausted, barely standing, but they were alive. I can't believe we made it, Clara whispered. Neither can I. Rowan sank onto the bed, his leg finally giving out. He winced, and Clara saw blood seeping through his trousers. You're hurt. It's fine. It's not fine. Clara knelt beside him, her hands shaking as she examined the wound. It was deep, probably from when he'd been dragged behind the horse. Infected, by the look of it. You need a doctor. We can't afford... I don't care. Clara stood and headed for the door. I'll find Ruth. She'll know someone. Clara, you saved my life multiple times. Let me save yours for once. She left before he could argue. Ruth sent for the town doctor, an ancient man named Foster who grumbled about young people and their foolishness while he cleaned and stitched Rowan's leg. He left medicine and instructions, refusing payment. Just don't make me come back here because you ignored my orders, Foster said gruffly. Rest that leg for a week. No walking, no riding, no heroics. When he left, Clara sat beside the bed and took Rowan's hand. You heard him. You're staying put. I don't take orders well. I've noticed. She smiled despite everything. But you're going to take these ones, because if you don't, I'll tie you to this bed myself. Rowan's mouth twitched. That sounds like a threat. It's a promise. He squeezed her hand. Thank you. For what? For staying, for fighting, for being too stubborn to give up on me. His voice was rough. I don't deserve you, Clara, but I'm selfish enough to keep you anyway. Good. Clara leaned down and kissed his forehead. Because I'm not going anywhere. Over the next week, they healed. Rowan's legs slowly improved, the infection fading under Foster's care. Clara helped Ruth in the store, earning their keep by sweeping floors and organizing shelves. It was simple work, but honest. And after everything they'd been through, simple felt like a gift. Pine Haven was different from Black Hollow. People here didn't ask too many questions, didn't judge too quickly. When word spread about what had happened, Ruth had a way of sharing just enough to gain sympathy without revealing too much. The town rallied. Someone donated a coat for Rowan. Someone else brought Clara a pair of boots that actually fit. The blacksmith offered Rowan work once his leg healed. Why are they being so kind? Clara asked Ruth one evening. Because most folks here have run from something, Ruth said simply. Bad marriages, bad debts, bad pasts. We understand that sometimes you need a fresh start, and we don't punish people for wanting one. Clara thought about Black Hollow and its judgment, its cruelty disguised as morality. I wish everywhere was like this. Me too, honey. Me too. 2 weeks after they arrived, a rider came to town. Clara was in the store when she heard the commotion outside. She looked out the window and her heart stopped. It was one of Silas's men, the same ranch hand who'd helped drag her through the forest that terrible night. He was talking to the sheriff, gesturing wildly. Clara ran upstairs to the room where Rowan was resting. He's here. One of Silas's men. Rowan was on his feet immediately, reaching for his boots. How many? Just one, I think. He's talking to the sheriff. We need to leave. No. Clara grabbed his arm. Ruth said the sheriff here is different, that he doesn't let outside law push him around. We should trust that. Clara saw, please, I'm tired of running. Rowan stared at her, jaw tight. Then he nodded. All right, but if this goes bad, we run. Deal? Deal. They went downstairs together. The sheriff, a lean man named Carson with silver hair and sharp eyes, was standing in the store with the ranch hand. Ruth was there too, arms crossed. These the ones you're looking for? Carson asked, nodding at Clara and Rowan. That's them, the ranch hand pointed. They're wanted for assault and kidnapping back in Black Hollow. Marshal Cutting sent me to bring them back. Did he now? Carson's tone was dry. You got papers? Papers? Warrants, legal documents, something that proves they're actually wanted and not just people you don't like. The ranch hand faltered. Well, no, but then you got nothing. Carson turned to Rowan and Clara. These two been here 2 weeks. They've been working, staying out of trouble, paying their debts. And I don't see any reason to throw them out based on the word of some ranch hand who rode in without proper authority. But Marshal Cutting ain't got jurisdiction here. Carson's voice hardened. This is my town, my law, and I say they stay. You got a problem with that? You take it up with the territorial judge. Otherwise, get on your horse and ride back to wherever you came from. The ranch hand's face went red. Silas Mercer ain't gonna like this. I don't care what Silas Mercer likes. Tell him if he wants these two, he can come himself and make his case proper. Until then, they're under my protection. Carson stepped closer. Now leave, before I decide you're the one causing trouble. The ranch hand spat on the floor and stormed out. Clara's legs went weak. Rowan caught her, his arm around her waist. Thank you, he said to Carson. Don't thank me yet. The sheriff looked at them both. Silas might come himself, and if he does, I'll need the full story, everything that happened, because if I'm going to keep protecting you, I need to know what I'm protecting you from. We'll tell you, Clara said. Everything. And they did. That night, sitting in Carson's office, they told him the whole story. From the night Samuel Whitlock sold his daughter, to the months in the cabin, to Silas's obsession and the marshal's corruption. Clara showed him the scars on her wrists from the ropes. Rowan showed him the wounds that were still healing. Carson listened without interrupting, When they finished, he was quiet for a long time. "I've heard rumors about Cutting," he said finally, "that he's on the Mercer family payroll, but rumors aren't proof. What you're describing, if it's true, it's criminal." "It's true," Clara said. "Then I'll send word to the territorial judge. Have him investigate. It'll take time, months maybe. But if Cutting's dirty, we'll prove it." Carson looked at Rowan. "In the meantime, you two need to decide what you want. You can stay here, build a life, hope Silas gives up, or you can keep running. Either way, you're not children anymore. You need to choose." Clara looked at Rowan. He looked back at her and she saw the question in his eyes. "I want to stay," she said. "I'm done running. I want to build something here. Something that's ours." "Are you sure?" Rowan asked. "Because there's no guarantee Silas will stop. He could come back. He could do a lot of things. But I'm not going to live my life afraid of what he might do." Clara's voice was steady. "I've spent 19 years being afraid. Of my father, of Black Hollow, of what people thought of me. And I'm done. I choose this. I choose you. I choose us." Rowan's eyes went bright. He pulled her close and pressed his forehead to hers. "Then we stay." Carson nodded. "All right. I'll do what I can to keep you safe, but you need to be smart. Keep your heads down, don't start trouble, and if Silas shows up, you let me handle it. Understood?" "Understood," they said together. Spring turned to summer. Rowan took the job at the blacksmith's, learning to work metal instead of wood. His leg healed slowly, leaving him with a limp he'd carry forever. Clara continued working for Ruth, eventually learning how to manage the store's books and inventory. They saved every penny, planning for the future. They didn't hear from Silas, didn't hear from Black Hollow. It was like that part of their lives had been sealed behind a wall, distant and fading. Some nights, Clara would wake up gasping, her body remembering the ropes and the fire and the mob. Rowan would hold her, his voice steady in the dark. "You're safe," he'd whisper. "I've got you. You're safe." And slowly, Clara started to believe it. In August, Ruth offered to sell them a piece of land on the edge of town. It was small, just 2 acres, but it had a creek running through it and enough flat ground for a cabin. "I'm getting old," Ruth said, "and I don't need all this land just sitting here. You two could build something good on it." "We can't afford," Rowan started. "I'm not asking you to pay all at once. You work it off over time. Fair deal for both of us." Ruth smiled. "Besides, you remind me of me and my husband when we were young, stubborn and broke and too in love to care." So they bought the land. It took them 3 months to build the cabin. Rowan designed it, and half the town showed up to help raise the walls. It was smaller than the mountain cabin, but sturdier. Clara planted a garden, and Rowan built a workshop where he could carve in the evenings. The first night they spent in their new home, Clara stood on the porch and looked out at the land they'd fought so hard for. Rowan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That I never thought I'd have this." Clara leaned back against him. "A home. A life. Someone who loves me for who I am, not who they want me to be. You deserve all of it. So do you." She turned in his arms. "We both do." Rowan kissed her, slow and sweet, and for the first time in her life, Clara felt like she was exactly where she belonged. In October, word finally came from the territorial judge. Marshal Cutting had been arrested. An investigation had uncovered years of bribery, corruption, and abuse of power. Silas's father had been implicated too. His money had been funding Cutting's operations. The Mercer Ranch was under scrutiny, and Silas himself had fled the territory, wanted for questioning. "It's over," Carson told them. "You're free. Officially." Clara didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Instead, she just held Rowan's hand and breathed. A week later, a letter arrived. From Tommy. Clara's hand shook as she opened it. "Clara, I don't know if you'll read this. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. But I need to tell you I'm sorry. For everything. For believing Silas's lies, for helping them find you, for not being strong enough to stand up to Pa. Pa died last month, drank himself to death just like you said he would. I'm living with Uncle James now, working at his mill. It's not much, but it's better than Black Hollow. Everyone knows the truth now. About Cutting, about Silas, about what they did to you and Rowan. Some people are ashamed. Most just pretend it never happened. That's how it is here, I guess. I hope you're happy, wherever you are. I hope you found something good. Because you deserve it, Clara. You always did. Your brother, Tommy. Clara folded the letter carefully and set it aside. Rowan watched her, concern in his eyes. You okay? Yeah. Clara wiped her eyes. Yeah, I am. You want to write back? Eventually, but not yet. She looked at him. Right now, I just want to be here, with you, in the life we built. That sounds perfect. Winter came, and with it, the first snow. Clara stood in the garden, empty now except for the stubborn herbs she'd planted near the house, and watched the flakes fall. They melted on her skin, cold and clean. Behind her, smoke curled from the cabin's chimney. Inside, Rowan was making dinner, probably burning it like he always did when he tried to cook without her help. The thought made her smile. She thought about the girl she'd been a year ago, the girl who'd stood in that saloon and watched her father sell her, who'd believed her life was over before it had really begun. That girl had been terrified, broken, convinced she'd never be anything more than a burden or a commodity. But she'd been wrong, because she'd survived. She'd fought. She'd chosen love over safety, truth over comfort, and freedom over acceptance. And in doing so, she'd become someone she never thought she could be. Someone strong, someone brave, someone whole. The door opened behind her and Rowan stepped out, a blanket in his hands. He draped it over her shoulders and stood beside her, both of them watching the snow. You'll freeze out here, he said. I'm fine. You're always fine, he smiled. Stubbornest woman I've ever met. You love it. I do. Rowan pulled her closer. I love everything about you. Clara turned to look at him. The man who'd saved her, who'd been saved by her in return, who'd proven that love didn't have to be ownership, that strength didn't have to be violence, that two broken people could build something beautiful together. I'm pregnant, she said. Rowan went still. What? I'm pregnant. About 2 months, I think. Clara's voice was steady despite the fear and hope tangled in her chest. I wanted to be sure before I told you. For a moment, Rowan just stared at her. Then his face crumpled, and he pulled her into his arms so tightly she could barely breathe. Are you happy? Clara whispered. I'm terrified. His voice was muffled against her hair. But yeah, I'm happy, so damn happy. They stood there in the falling snow, holding each other, and Clara felt something settle in her chest. Peace. Real, lasting peace. Because this was her life now. Not the one her father had tried to sell, not the one Silas had tried to steal, but the one she'd fought for and earned and built with her own hands. And it was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The baby came in June, a girl with dark hair and pale eyes like her father. They named her Ruth, after the woman who'd given them sanctuary when they needed it most. Clara held her daughter and thought about all the women who'd come before her. Her mother, who'd died too young. Ruth, who'd survived and helped others survive. Herself, who'd learned that freedom was something you claimed, not something you were given. She's going to be strong, Rowan said, touching the baby's tiny hand. Like her mother. And kind, Clara added. Like her father. And stubborn as hell, Rowan said with a laugh. Like both of us. Clara smiled. That's the most important part. Because in the end, that's what had saved them. Not luck. Not kindness from strangers, but the stubborn, furious refusal to be anything other than themselves, to accept anything less than the life they deserved. The world had tried to break them, had tried to convince them they were worth less than they were, that their choices didn't matter, that love was just another word for possession. But they'd proven it wrong, and they'd keep proving it wrong, every day, in every choice they made, in every way they loved each other and the life they'd built. For as long as they lived. Years later, when people asked Clara about her story, she'd tell them the truth. Not the sanitized version where she was rescued by a good man and lived happily ever after, but the real version. The messy, complicated, painful one, where she was sold like property and had to fight like